What happened at your work which caused multiple people to all quit at once? I did landscape construction. The cheap ass owner kept taking bigger and bigger projects while never hiring more help. We were all overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious as hell. One of our foremen quit and I followed suit a few days later. 2 more guys quit the next day. He was down to 3 guys for the obscene amount of work he wanted to do. Of course everything gets way behind schedule, but he's convinced it's not his fault at all. He went out of business less than a year later. I once worked at a company that ramped up from 4 to 8 people in a small shop. Things were busy, but the owner kept making rookie mistakes like not buy material in bulk because he didn't like seeing a big bill all at once. Fast forward a year and paychecks start to bounce. Then he fired the 3 guys that suck around so they could collect unemployment, while he paid the difference under the table. Super shady. He ended up selling out to a competitor. Not sure what he is up to now. They laid off half the company with no warning. This included a gentleman who was less than a year from retirement and had been there for 35 plus years. The company was shocked when half the remaining people abandoned ship shortly thereafter. At previous, and final, employer they did a round of layoffs. Now this is Europe, so you need a reason to fire people with a contract, and they said it was for economic reasons. So naturally, like rats on a ship, a massive exodus began. Everyone was looking for a new job. Management didn't expect this, so a month and a half later, they released their Christmas speech, calling for fresh young talent, and asking people to stick together like family when they fired 30 people just 6 weeks ago. Come January, the second wave of the exodus was well underway. When I was 16, I worked in the concession stand at a minor league baseball stadium. Minimum wage at the time was $5.15 per hour. This job paid $8, and it was always in the evenings, so it was perfect work for a high school student. The only bad thing was our management was terrible. The main manager would throw toddler tantrums about once a shift over stupid bullshit, like not ordering enough of a specific beer, she did the ordering, or running out of pre-cut lemons for tea. One night the stadium was running a promotion and it was incredibly busy, easily 2 to 3 times as much as the normal volume of customers. We were all working our asses off handling multiple roles each with absolutely no downtime. Although we all cleaned as we worked, nobody had a chance to do thorough cleaning for the whole shift because of the never-ending horde of hungry baseball fans. The manager showed up 3 to 4 hours late per usual and throws the biggest ducking tantrum ever over the unswept floor. Finally, she announces, "Listen up you lazy ducks. Minimal work gets minimal pay. Everybody is being paid minimum wage tonight because you slobs won't clean up anything." Both of our bartenders and the bar back quit on the spot, which caused a chain reaction. We all took off our aprons and hats to leave. She blocked the exit and was red in the face from screaming, so one of the cooks climbed out of one of the big serving windows where we served customers, so I did the same and most of the staff followed. Bear in mind that this all happened in front of like 200 plus customers. Of course, my final paycheck got lost, so I had to file a wage theft complaint with the Texas Workforce Commission. How'd that wage theft complaint go down? Sounds like it'd be super satisfying just to slip the envelope into the letterbox. Filed the complaint, submitted my clock in and clock out receipts for the week. We got paid weekly, and previous pay stubs to verify my pay rate. After like 3 weeks, I was contacted by the person handling my claim that my previous employer had mailed me a check for the whole amount I was owed plus a penalty. The check arrived within a few days. The penalty was $25 IIK. Later that year, the same employer refused to provide my W-2 for tax filing, so I filed a complaint with the IRS and used my pay stubs with a special form to complete my taxes. I don't know what happened regarding that, but that lady's life imploded for non-work related reasons. She got caught cheating on her husband, then got caught faking cancer for sympathy. Owners retired. They were literally the greatest people, both very sweet, but kept the place running like a well-oiled machine. They took pretty good care of us and their restaurant. When they left, they gave the restaurant over to their nephew, who at the time was a busboy waiter, kind of standoffish. Didn't really interact with us too much, a bit lazy at times. but for the most part did his shit and went home. He seemed okay. Until he got the power of being the owner. He fired 4 people, including 2 of the 4 cooks, and 2 of the 3 dishwashers, literally that same day, on a Friday night just before the dinner rush, all because he didn't like their attitude. He refused to allow people to take vacation that they'd already requested and gotten confirmed by the original owners, would change the schedule randomly without telling anyone and then scream at people when they missed a shift or came in late because of it. He'd refuse to replenish the kitchen until we were literally already out of things, then take forever to put in the orders. He showed up randomly and would drink at the bar, for free of course because he was the owner, and then bring in all his buddies to drink with him. Together they'd get way out of hand and grab at women and try to start fights. Within the first month of him being the owner, over half the staff had quit, usually walking out literally in the middle of their shifts. After being screamed at, they'd basically throw down their aprons and tell everyone else that they were so sorry but they couldn't do it anymore. After the last cook, this big dude who usually kept the kitchen laughing and running at a decent pace, started crying in the middle of his shift and dropped everything he was doing after the boss came and yelled at him for being too slow and making slop, then walked out. The rest of us just bailed along with him. 4 months later the place was closed. His aunt and uncle were absolutely furious and devastated that he'd run the business they built up for over 30 years into the ground. That's really sad but sounds like a poor decision on the old owners. Who puts someone in a busboy position to such a high position without training and evaluation? If they knew they were retiring they should have begun to train him so he would be ready to take over, and if they would have realized he was ill-suited then they could have found someone to take over instead. I realized I forgot to add that one of the 4 people he fired initially was the senior manager who was supposed to show him what they hadn't, but being their nephew he did do extra stuff and they showed him what he should have been doing whenever they were there. Officially though his job was just being the busboy or waiter for a few years before this was decided. But on the whole yeah. They should not have just up and left to retire without giving him a few months in training wheels to make sure he could actually hack it. None of us thought he'd be like that though. When they reached out to try and find out what had happened, they moved out of state. They were absolutely horrified to hear how he behaved towards the staff, but by that point it was too late to do anything about it. Wasn't my office but one in my building. The old CEO retired. He was extremely well loved and very fair. His replacement was a lady not known for her social skills. She hired her sister as the new VP and passed over everyone who was in line for promotions. Literally everyone but the sister and the secretary quit the next week together to go work for a competitor. The former CEO had to come back to try and fix everything. He ended up having to help the new CEO hire basically a new company. I don't think it's going well. I feel bad for that old CEO. Yeah. He'd just sold the company to the new CEO and some investors too. Like his ass looked like he just flew straight back from some sunny island on his first week of retirement to deal with it. Lovely dude though. I see why some of those people stuck around for 20 years and quit in less than a month after his departure. They bought air mattresses so employees wouldn't have to leave to go home during a classically busy season. Mass exodus after that. Just sleep here. Don't go home to your families or home where you can distress. Just be here. Never leave and follow my logic here sir. You can kiss the fattest and most robust part of us cause I quit. We had a handshake agreement with the C-levels 3 months of 5 10s or 12s as needed to get a project back on track for a 10k bonus. Then they kept letting the scope creep and amended our handshake to 5 10s till the project was done. 6 months after starting we all threatened to quit as a team so they paid us and told us we could go back to 8s. The paycheck cleared and we all turned in 2 weeks notice that month. They lost the entire software development, test, and personal management team on that project. The project was scrapped the next year because nobody knew how to maintain it because we left no documentation because of the death march not leaving us time or give a duck to document. Lol, how are they still in business? Are they in business? They got bought out. All of their American talent has left and been replaced with Bolivians and Indians. Which no insult to the Indians or Bolivians, they are competent programmers. But replacing your architects and seniors with super cheap remote employees is going as well as you would expect. After being bought they reached out to a bunch of us to come back as contractors to train our replacements, but most of us told them to piss up a rope. I was a line cook at an Olive Garden. There were 7 of us working the line on busy weekend holiday nights running 2 windows. On a busy Saturday night one of our lead line cooks was a little late, was scheduled to start at 4 p.m. but he didn't get there until 16:15. It wasn't a big deal to the rest of the crew. He was a reliable guy and would for sure show up, and additionally he was really good at working the window position, which handles incoming tickets, orders, and could prioritize everything to make it all run smoothly. This Olive Garden was busy as duck and a bad window cook could easily back everything up 2+ hours. Anyways, the lead cook was a little late and the new kitchen manager decided it was time to flex his position and fire the cook on the spot as he was putting on his apron to join the rest of us on the line. Dude that just got fired tells the kitchen manager to duck off and he bolts out of there. The rest of us were just like, what the duck, man? Now we're all going to be ducked on a Saturday night. Customers will be pissed. Bar waitstaff will get ducked on tips, etc. That kitchen manager flexed on the wrong night. The 6 remaining line cooks, myself included, untied our aprons and all walked out in unison. It felt great. That was one of the best decisions I've ever made. We stopped providing free coffee, and we're so cheap that we sold our coffee maker. This was in Seattle, so a couple of people bought their own coffee makers to put in their cubes. That tripped the breaker several times, so it was very disruptive since our computers would shut down. Management then said no coffee allowed in the office at all. We lost 4 very good engineers. Management then said no coffee allowed in the office at all. Who could possibly think this kind of policy would fly? That's unreal. Sounds like the grounds for a damn riot. No coffee allowed in the office at all. If there is one way to get rid of your technical workers, it is that. Or salespeople. The last place I worked at had 3 coffee makers on one floor and 6 on another. Don't get between people and their coffee. Over-reliance on institutional knowledge. Basically, it was company non-policy not to bother documenting anything, never to create procedures, never to get wrapped around the axle by planning, etc. So the jobs basically lurched from crisis to crisis aimlessly in the name of being biased towards action and not getting bogged down by bureaucracy. As such, getting anything at all done meant finding the person who already had the knowledge in their head and relying on them to remember how they addressed a specific issue previously. Annual maintenance was effectively a scheduled crisis with everyone fumbling to remember exactly what they did a year ago, or to adapt memories of previous crises into a solution for the current crisis. Then one day, a multi-decade employee got sick of the dysfunction and left for greener pastures. This gaping hole meant that simple problems became crises and genuine crises became group hysterics. This made an already toxic environment almost comically radioactive, and within 2 or 3 months, over 3/4 of the department had left the company. The boss went off on a tirade on me for something that wasn't my fault, and I got him to scream people like, you are expendable pieces in this company and I can replace you tomorrow if I wanted to. 80% of the engineers quit the next day. Simply didn't show up. Including me. From what I know, the entire project folded because my now ex-boss couldn't find people to replace us because no one wanted to do the kind of work he was looking for at the salary he was paying. That backfired. Smiley face. There was one guy who was going to be fired for coming in late constantly. However, many of the potential replacements his company interviewed wanted a ridiculously high salary. Turns out, that one guy lowballed himself on his salary. All of a sudden, coming in 15 minutes late each day became quite the bargain. I was hired by the new owners to replace the existing manager. I was under the impression that he was moving on to another job somewhere. So after about 4 days I ask him where he's headed and if he's excited. He just looks blankly at me and says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just training you as the assistant manager, right? The look I gave him must have been a great tip-off because he got up and walked into one of the new owner's offices. After about 30 seconds they were screaming at each other, then he just storms out of the office, grabs his stuff, give me the finger, and leaves. Over the next few days I'm trying to calm things with the employees. They're not faulting me, but now have a very bad taste in their mouths about the new ownership. Over about a 7 to 10 day time period my team shrank from 15 people down to 3. I hobbled along with that the best I could while we tried to hire new people, But the new owners were offering so little we had trouble finding people. After 3 months or so of that I started to get fed up and overwhelmed, and when the owners started to get on me about missed deadlines I had it. We were still only at 5 people, 2 of which were brand new and still training. They didn't allow me to refuse work or push deadlines out. They expected the same output as a 15-person team. So after my 3rd day in a row of being berated for missing a deadline that was impossible to make, I quit. Hiring you to replace him without telling him is evil. Hiring you to replace him without telling you they haven't told him is dumb. At that point, there isn't much to do except try to make the best of it, but I'm glad you were able to get out of there. Hiring you to replace him without telling you they haven't told him is dumb. Somehow management that expects to get 3 times the workload from a trainee than an experienced worker doesn't exactly strike me as brilliant.